Alex, how much money would I have to pay to get you to write or do a cover of the Paul McCartney track from Destiny?
Let's see. Okay, so I know how to play the drums. So you would have to get me lessons for guitar, bass, vocals, and every stringed instrument that they throw onto that fucking song. That would probably take at least a few years of lessons to get to the point where I could play all those tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would have to get me into a studio where I could record it at a decent quality.
Uh-huh.
So $11 million.
All right, that's fair. Might take me a couple of years, but or maybe I'll just start a Kickstarter.
Yeah,
We need to
yeah,
raise $11 million to get Alex Navarro to train and then record a cover of whatever that awful Destiny track is called.
I think it's called Destiny. I think the song is called Destiny. I don't know that for certain, but I think it's called Destiny.
Fuck. It's not.
It's not a good song.
It's not. It has the word destiny in it.
I know it does. It talks about building bridges. Because, there's a story that I saw pop up today where Bungie very specifically, or someone from Bungie came out and said, we did not give Paul McCartney any money for this song.
That doesn't make it any better.
No, it doesn't. But in a way, it almost feels like they're trying to say, no, look, we would not have given him any money if this was what he was going to deliver us in a weird kind of roundabout way. Like, they're just trying to say, no, we didn't spend any money on this. For the love of God, no way. He just wanted to appeal to a new audience.
I can't blame him there, but I don't know if that track's going to do it. I don't know if that's going to endear him to an audience.
I mean, it might endear him to an audience of dads that have somehow managed to go all this far into their lives not hearing a Paul McCartney song, but I don't imagine there are very many of those.
I don't think dads get to see the credits of games either. Dads don't finish games. That's been like my takeaway being a dad is that you don't finish video games.
Not very often.
What are they doing putting at the end credits?
Here's the best quote. This is from community manager Eric Osborne.
Mm-hmm.
There was no check involved, bigger or otherwise. He's in it for the creativity. He got a wonderful opportunity to reach an audience that wouldn't typically be immersed in Paul McCartney.
Immersed during the credit sequence of this game.
I want to be immersed in Paul McCartney. I want to crawl up inside his abdominal cavity. I just want to take a nice little nap in there. It probably back in the USSR is probably just playing in there at all times. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it.
That might also be how I feel about Destiny. Just that's too far, but.
Well, tell me how you do feel about Destiny, because you and I have both been playing this game this week, in between other things. I have some reasonably strong opinions about it. I've gotten myself to level 10 as of I think night before last. I did not play it at all last night, and guess what? I didn't mind that so much. How have you been feeling about it?
I sort of like it moment to moment. It's a game that I think I'm like you. I don't particularly miss it when I'm not playing it. And last night when I booted it up, the key difference was that I wasn't playing with anyone. When I played the first 3 or 4 hours of the game, and I kind of made it up through level 7 and pretty close to 8. I was doing that with friends, and when you play Destiny with friends, it's a much different game than when you play it with just yourself. And I don't know if it's a better game, but just things that you do with people are inherently you're distracted. I don't know. I wrote an article about this that'll probably go up today where I try to articulate this idea that when I played through Diablo 3 recently, just kind of stormed through it on co-op, and I enjoyed myself, but I don't know how much I enjoyed the mechanics of the game as much as I just enjoyed the experience of playing through the game with someone. And I kind of get that same feeling playing Destiny.
Yeah. So for my part, I have played it primarily on my own, though I have teamed up with friends on certain missions when they were around, and it made sense. I get from the time I spent playing it, it is definitely I think it is a better game when you have other people around. but it's not because the gameplay is necessarily any better because of that. It's like you said, there is that social aspect to it. There is a certain energy to having other people that you can communicate with and do this stuff with, because on its own, going into any one of the missions that I have played thus far in that game, there is no energy to that game on its own without having that human element around you, without having, you know, that lively world that they have talked about, which in this case amounts to two of your friends being next to you. This is just, it's one of the most sterile, kind of airless games that I've played, especially at this level. Like this you know, this kind of like AAA title or whatever. Like it's bizarre to me how little, like, just between the story and the pace of it and everything, it all is just sort of like, it just kind of floating along.
It
like,
feels very sterile.
It's totally sterile. It just wants to kind of float you from place to place. It'll kind of, you know, it'll just kind of toss its story out at you when it feels like it. It'll just kind of like toss these random enemies at you, and you're supposed to kind of react to it. None of the environments, like, they look nice, but like there's nothing really special or unique about it. It's just kind of all there, and I don't understand how this game, something this kind of weightless, came to be this way. It's bizarre to me.
Yeah, the story is, well, you know, one of my pet peeves in video games is hiding storytelling in, you know, like, you know, notebooks that you find or audio diaries. Like, it can be done well, but it really bothers me when a lot of embedded storytelling is just kind of shuffled away into objects.
Yeah.
And Destiny certainly does that, not in terms of audio diaries, but you collect these things called grimoire cards.
Yeah.
Grimoire cards that happen when, you know, you hit certain levels or you collect certain weapons or defeat certain enemies. Like, it's basically, there are lore drops that go along with your loot drops that fill in a lot of the backstory in Destiny. But it is unfathomable to me that you have to go to Bungie.net or load up an iPhone app to read them. There is no way in the game to read all of this stuff that they have baked in for you to learn about the world. You have to go to a fucking website. And you know what I don't want to do in the middle of a game, and to learn about what the enemy I just killed or the reason I killed it, is go to a fucking website.
Yeah. That's not the way to tell a story. And, you know, if you want to say to me that Bungie's primary goal in this was not necessarily storytelling, that's fine. You know, if the focus was the gameplay and creating like a lively world to be in, and, you know, a good multiplayer kind of setting, that's fine. I don't necessarily think it has done that either. Like, you know, the excuse for reviewers not getting the game more than a day before it went out was that, you know, they wanted to make sure that those who were criticizing the game would be able to experience it in the full, you know, the full world in all its glory, that you would experience, you know, the lively, filled world full of people. So far for me, that has amounted to seeing some dudes wandering around when I do those I forget what they're called, but the missions where you go.
Public events? Public events?
Yeah, well, the ones where you're just wandering around the environment and you're like going to those beacons and doing those side missions, basically, to, you know, like, I've been doing them for Vanguard bounties, and that's pretty much the only reason. Seeing some people wandering around there and going to that hub area, the tower, and just seeing people wandering around, like, that's not really special or really all that interesting. It's just like, cool, there are people around, so what? I can, you know, again, having friends with you, I think, helps, because that negates some of the I don't know, frankly, just the kind of mundane feel of it. But I don't think it really makes it that much better. Like, it's a completely competent shooter. The part where you are shooting aliens, that works because it's pretty good. The weapons are pretty good. But I haven't really gotten that excited about any of the loot that I found thus far. You know, someone in the chat said, you know, well, there's actually a lot of stuff in there if you go looking for it. Like what? what am I supposed to be looking for other than loot cases and kind of just the random shit scattered around, and just like where enemies are? Like, what am I supposed to be looking for in that game? That's the part that has not been communicated to me at all, other than just go do these missions, get your friends together, shoot some fucking aliens. Which, fine, I'm cool with an alien shooter that is a multiplayer focused thing, but this is not an overwhelmingly impressive version of that by any stretch.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found really confusing about the structure of the game is, so, like, let's take, I think in many ways Destiny is a first-person Diablo. It shares many of the same sort of structural flaws. I don't know if they're inherent to these types of games, but they seem to be present. One of which is just a poor story, because Diablo 3 also does not have a particularly compelling one. And a lot of the reason you're playing is for the loot aspect, that you're progressing in that way, and maybe you're doing it with friends and on your own. But so when you play Diablo and you head into a dungeon, you have like this very structured environment. It's randomly generated, but when you explore around, you want to kind of see everything, because you're never going to be there again, and there could be like a chest around the corner. But like, it's a very contained environment. You can wrap your head around it, and when you move on, the map is filled. You felt like you've kind of accomplished what you need to do on that part. In Destiny, you don't get that sense at all, because you revisit location after location after location over and over and over again. So often when I go in to do a mission, I don't feel particularly compelled to explore, because the ridge over to my right, it's probably just going to be part of another mission that I have to come back for. So why would I go around poking through the buildings there and hoping that I come across a chest? Not to mention that the loot is, they try and straddle this line where you don't get that much loot, so that the loot that you do get is meaningful.
Yeah.
But it also means that I don't feel particularly interested in exploring, because most of the time in the first 5-6 hours that I've played the game, I'm not rewarded for exploring. There are other environments, but it's not. I need to turn the corner most of the time and find something interesting on the other side, and that doesn't happen. Thus, I've more or less begun sticking to the critical path and just kind of going along the mission, rather than poking around and seeing what the world has to offer.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm 100% down on it. Like, there are moments that I've certainly enjoyed. A couple of those like fire team missions that I've done with some people have been really fun. I do like aspects of the game. I do think it looks very nice, certainly. I think the character creator stuff was something that I really enjoyed playing around with. I actually spent a really long time finally trying to decide what kind of character I wanted, which is not something I tend to do very often, because normally most character creators aren't that interesting, outside of a few rare exceptions. And I thought they did a good job with that stuff. And yeah, and again, the gameplay can be fun. The structure of it and the total lack of meaningful story, and that just absolutely god awful Peter Dinklage dialogue is really fucking with me at a certain point.
It's not even so much that I generally agree with the criticism that the additional robotic overtones to his voice have not really changed the actual performance, but I think it's actually just largely reflective of the storytelling in general, which just falls very flat. You are dumped into a world with no context, and the game gives you very little context, even as you're progressing in it. The game begins with you being woken up, and it's not made clear to you. Well, it's made a little bit clear to you why what's happening. It's the bits of the Traveler created these ghosts, and these ghosts are then waking up dead guardian. They're waking up. I don't know why I'm really doing anything. I mean, I know why I'm doing things, right? Like, the game lays out a very basic idea that you're trying to save the last city in humanity, but it provides no emotional stakes. It provides no motivation other than the speaker told you to go there. I guess let's go there. And that's and when I'm not finding the loot drops to be the thing that's motivating me, I'm not finding the story to be the thing that's motivating me. It's a game that on paper I think sounds like a lot of fun, And when I'm playing it, there are instances of complete brilliance, enough that I'm going to stick with it, at least through the level cap, and I want to see more of what there is to offer here. But it feels so much like a rough draft. It really does feel like a rough draft of the game they want to make, and at some point you've got to ship it and iterate from there. I'm just curious, when they talk about the Destiny 10-year plan, how much of the iteration happens here? Like, how much of Destiny 1.0 evolves in radical ways now, or is that something we have to wait until Destiny 2?
Yeah, and it's a valid question. I mean, they have obviously a fair amount of DLC planned for this game, but they haven't really talked too much about beyond that. And you're right about the rough draft feeling. Like, it does feel like several sketched out ideas that never got beyond that stage of just like, well, these are the ideas we're working with. Let's just polish these to the shiniest sheen that we can possibly do without actually figuring out if any of them fit together or not. I think that is where a lot of my issue comes in, is that just a lot of the pieces of that game don't feel like they completely fit together. I'm probably in the same boat as you. I will probably hit the level cap. I will probably finish the story content. Whether I actually choose to dive into the DLC or not, I may not even touch that stuff unless people tell me it is overwhelmingly better than what I've been playing thus far. I don't know. I don't know what the long-term thing for that game is, because it doesn't make a great first impression. And I feel like if you really want to keep people engaged in a game like that for a long period of time, you really need to make a good first impression. Like, you can't walk that stuff back and be like, okay, we know this was a problem, but here's where the good stuff is coming down the road. Like, you can't retain an audience well that way. It has happened sometimes in the past, but not very often. Usually you have to start with something really good to keep people wanting to come back. And while this game has sold exceedingly well, apparently, I don't know that it's going to have that audience retention that they want.
Yeah, I'm curious about that for sure. And one of the things that I wonder about is, obviously this is, I think the first, at least in terms of how it plays, like the first really successful melding of an MMO structure with, like, first-person shooting. It's a good shooter. It feels fun to play. Yeah. If you're familiar with the Halo games, if you've enjoyed the Halo games, you're going to feel very comfortable with Destiny awfully quickly. And in that respect, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. But the rest of the MMO stuff that kind of came with it, like, perhaps that's inherent to the structures. I'm not super familiar with MMOs, so I can only sort of speak broadly in what I've taken away from friends that have played, World of Warcraft and EverQuest and games like that. But a lot of the enjoyment, like, I've been playing Destiny with a friend that plays a lot of World of Warcraft, and the stuff that I kind of look at and haven't quite gotten yet, or the stuff that I found kind of boring, he gets really excited about. And so it does seem like they've successfully translated a lot of that stuff to a different type of game, to a shooter. But when you play Destiny, it feels like a Halo game, it looks like a Halo game, it plays like a Halo game. Thus, you have a lot of built-in expectations of what goes along with that. And Destiny clearly isn't that game. And that may be, or it, not maybe, is intentional. But as a result of that, I can't help but be disappointed about the things that it doesn't do as a result. If it's telling a really interesting, provoking story, not that I'm saying Halo narratives are like the end-all be-all, but they were fun. I enjoyed them. Master Chief was a cool character, and Cortana was an interesting side kick. And Destiny tries to establish that companionship and that idea that you're the sort of this one hero, but doesn't create anything motivational to go along with it. Doesn't give you anything to go with it. And I guess that's what ultimately sort of disappoints me, is that this looks a lot like the game I wanted, and in a lot of ways it isn't, and it kind of feels like they sold me a wrong bill of goods. Yeah, it does. All right, well, we should probably table this discussion for now until you and I have both probably worked our way through the remainder of Destiny. I know Jeff is pretty far ahead of us. I don't know when he's planning on doing the review for the game, but I think if he hasn't hit the level cap yet, he's pretty close to it, so maybe soon. We'll see. Because it's like, what, you hit the level cap and then you continue to upgrade yourself through gear at that point.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of level capped gear, some of which I've managed to collect through members of the guild I joined already, but I can't touch it because I still have like 10 levels to go. So yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Did you play anything else this week besides Destiny?
I finished Diablo 3 up through the expansion, so I'm at Reaper of Souls. I was playing that with the friend that I was playing Destiny with, so I'm not sure when I'll get back to Diablo 3, but I at least kind of blew through the main storyline of that, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I enjoyed playing it with someone, and again, this will be in a piece that I put up later today. I don't know how much I enjoyed the game as much as I enjoyed the experience, which is kind of where I have fallen on Destiny as well. And then other than that, I started kind of clicking through Hack and Slash, the new game from Double Fine, which went early access a number of months ago, but I tend to generally shy away from early access stuff and kind of wait for it to hit 1.0, and Hack and Slash went 1.0 earlier this week. The game, if you're not familiar, and I think there's an unfinished on the site, kind of walking through the earlier version of the game. It basically sets up sort of a Zelda-like world in which your sword breaks in half, and it turns out it's a USB stick, and then that USB stick can be inserted into all sorts of objects in the world, and you can modify their properties. The game tries to convey a sense of what it's like to be a programmer, in which the world is not infinitely, but largely open to your manipulation. And one of the ways it tries to do that, in very basic terms, is let's say you come to a room full of stones that can be moved. Now, right now, all the attributes of the stones mean that they cannot be moved. They've been moved as many spaces as they can be, or the spaces are which that even if you were to move it forward, it wouldn't get you through to the other side. So when you stick your USB stick in, you get up a prompt, and that prompt allows you to change variables such as how many spaces the stone moves, what direction the stone moves in. But it's more nuanced than that because, for example, the way the stone moves is not forward or back, because that would be the direction it's going to move is relative to the direction you're pushing it from. So it would make no sense for you to necessarily program it as up, down, left, right, because that might seem a little relative. Instead, it's ones and zeros. So if you set it to -2, when you push it, it will move -2 backwards in the direction you're moving it from. So it's properties like that that are all over the place that give the game an extremely unique feel. And when you solve puzzles, you have an ownership over them that I haven't really felt in another game before.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember seeing that game, I want to say PAX East this year. That was the first time I had gotten a look at it, and I thought it looked really cool. I've heard some stuff about the early access version, which is to say that it doesn't have an ending in there yet.
It does now. Everything's
there
now. Yeah,
everything's in there now.
Yeah, it's 1.0.
Okay, good. That's glad to hear. So that means I will probably finally check it out. Yeah, that game seemed really rad from the very little bit that I played of it. The hacking mechanic stuff is like you said, it's something kind of unique that I've not really seen done in that way before. And I like Zelda-like games, especially ones that have some kind of weird, goofy humor to it. So I feel like that might be right up my alley.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't, these are all early game puzzles, so forgive me for spoiling like how some of them work, but it's a lot of what you end up doing in the game is trying to figure out which objects you can manipulate. So there are ones that are obvious that'll just have like a USB port that okay, go up there, hit spacebar, whack it, and then I'll get the things that are in front of me. And then others are you kind of have to look around the environment a little bit to figure out what exactly you can interact with. So, for example, there's a puzzle in which your little companion, like your Navi equivalent, is singing. And when it sings, then that makes the turtles that you have to use to cross this body of water go away. They get annoyed by the singing, and so they go underwater, and then you can't progress. And depending on where you walk, Navi follows, the Navi equivalent follows you. I'm just going to call it Navi just because I have no idea what it's actually called in the game. I think, I named it. I named it Oi because I name every sidekick Oi from the Dark Tower. So I guess I'll call it Oi. And so when Oi follows you, then the very thing you need to move forward goes away. So what I realized, I was like, I'm hitting the turtles. I can't modify the turtles. When I'm walking into these spots, I can't quite cross. Then I realized you can actually hit Oi, you can hit your sidekick, and that brings up a bunch of things you can manipulate with him. So in this case, you have you can modify both the volume at which he's singing and the distance at which it's heard. So I brought down I left it at full volume, but I brought the distance down to 0, which means he's singing at full volume just to himself, which meant that I was then able to cross the bridge I was at. Or there's another puzzle in which you have to, again, it's another in the one where you have a bunch of turtles, but you're at like a spot where they hatch, and when you whack that, it brings up a bunch of pattern options. So you can choose how quickly they are hatched, at the pace that they walk, and other things like that. So you get into actual behavior manipulation in order to then create turtles that are born at a rate that allows you to then walk across the water. It's a bunch of stuff like that that is really intimidating up front. The game, I imagine, is going to get very complicated very quickly. You have an item that lets you manipulate the day-night time, and not just make it day or make it night. You have a value from 1 to 100 that just changes the speed at which the day-night cycle occurs. And so I have mine set at 46 because I don't know. I just have it set at 46. But
it's a good number.
Yeah, you can set it to something much faster, and then the day-night cycle goes at a much faster rate. You have another object that allows you to manipulate time and space so that it can function sort of as a way to get around the map, but it literally, when you go backwards in time, it doesn't just take you to that place. You literally revert back to the state you were in, and then as you're progressing through the game, it will branch off into different paths. Like if you do use that item, that creates a branch, and then that's like one version of the game you were playing, that if you want to return to that, you can, or you can create a new branch that's possible. It illustrates a lot of what games take into account in the background, and decisions that programmers and designers make and that you don't actually see surfaced, and then gives you the tools to manipulate those, but it's actually integrated into the gameplay in a way that's like it's really meaningful, and you like when you solve a puzzle, like you really feel like you fucking solved that puzzle.
Yeah. So that's only out on PC right now, right? Is that something that is designed to come to consoles at some point, or?
I mean, no. I mean, yes, they could make it work. I doubt it. I really doubt that it goes anywhere other than the PC. I guess there's a world in which it could work, but they would require modifying some of the there's a lot of typing involved in like one of the puzzles that I thought was very clever, and this is all very early in the game, so it's you're given some letters to a password, and when you have to input that password, there are a bunch of statues in front of you, and when you type in the letters that you do know, those statues turn green, and then everything else is red. So then you use that to try and figure out, either through brute force or through sort of subtly teasing out what the actual password is, because you can just type in the letters, and then if you get the right one, it's going to turn green. So there's some keyboard inputs that might be tough to translate properly to a console. It is certainly something that could be done, but it's such a PC-ass game, even in its structure, it would kind of shock me if it came to a console. I think they're going to focus more on costume quests and things like that. So they also released the source code with the game, so if people want to really get into exactly what's there, they totally can, and the game supports mods up front. So hopefully people will do some crazy stuff with it. I feel like when that game got on early access, people were interested in it, and then it just kind of fluttered away because the early access problem of getting a lot of attention when the game's unfinished, and then when the game is finished, you might have already made your first impression with a lot of people, which I think is sort of a problem with early access for games that aren't, DayZ.
Yeah, makes sense.
What about yourself?
So yeah, I will probably Well, I will definitely check that out because that game sounds really cool. Um, the only other thing I managed to play this week was NHL 15, which there is now a review of on the
Two
site.
stars.
Yeah.
2 stars. My favorite part of your review was the part where EA made it seem like the content they're providing for the game after release
Yeah.
is a benefit as opposed to just things they couldn't ship it with.
Well, to be absolutely fair, if you are shipping a version of a game that has basically had most of its guts ripped out from all the previous versions, there's no way you can frame that or that situation honestly without making it sound like y'all done fucked up. So the way they dance around the language by saying things like we're building a foundation, and we will be continuing to support the game post-release, that's the stuff you have to say, because otherwise you just sound like y'all fucked up, and that's not a good look. You can't do that from a PR perspective. So yeah, I looked back on my previous NHL reviews. This series, has been going for many years. The first one I did for the site was NHL 12. Every one I have given since I've been working with Giant Bomb has been 4 stars. And the reason for that is because even when they don't make huge strides, the core game has always been really, really, really good. So it's never felt overly stagnant. This is the first time with that series where I feel like they completely tripped over themselves. They were so adamant about getting it on the current generation of consoles. Somewhere in there, I don't know if there was a production fuck up, if resources got taken away, whatever. Deeply fundamental aspects of this series are just gone. And some of them are coming back via those patches. But the fact that, and this is the most mind-blowing one, that you can't even get the 3 stars of the game after you finish a game, which is just like Hockey 101 type stuff. Like, that is a thing that they present in every hockey broadcast. That has been in every hockey game for as long as I can remember playing mainstream hockey games. That they couldn't even put that little detail in there says to me that something really bad happened while they were developing that game. I don't know what it was. I've heard stuff. I don't know if it's true or not. I heard that at some point some part of that team went to go work on UFC. That's unfounded. I can't say if it's true or not, but it feels like that happened because it feels like they just got the barest version of the game they could working on those consoles, which is, admittedly, still fun to play in a competitive environment. It is still good hockey on the ice. But all the other modes and features, all the stuff that, keeps you playing once you've gotten past the point of just wanting to play online all the time, just isn't there. And that's crazy. That is crazy to me. I know that NHL isn't their biggest sports seller by any stretch. It's probably not even their 3rd best, but it's just it's mind-boggling. And considering the amount of goodwill that franchise has built up in a section of EA that does not have a lot of goodwill, that's a real bummer.
Yeah, the Madden series just kind of plods around, kind of ebbing and flowing between 3 and 4 stars if we're to be that reductive. But the NBA series has obviously had an extraordinarily tough time, not just in the tail end of last generation, but at the beginning of this generation. And it, obviously it's probably production-wise incredibly difficult to put out, to make that transition to a new set of consoles. And we saw this the last time around, in which the cycle is you get a bare bones version of the new game for the new set of consoles, while they get all that other stuff ready for the next game. But if that's the bargain that's been set up, it's not perfect, but what the baked-in expectation there, though, is that at least the base game, the thing that the diehards are willing to sacrifice the other stuff for, is going to be as good as it's ever been, or at least on par with the previous year, and it's going to look a little fancier.
And the thing, I mentioned this in the review, while that is normally true, this generation didn't really have that with the debuts of the new stuff. Because last year, Madden was basically just the game they put out on 360 and PS3. They just up-res some stuff and added a couple of little bells and whistles, and that was it. And that worked because it was still the core game that a lot of people still liked. You know, I was kind of lukewarm on last year's game, but it still worked, and it had all the stuff that you wanted in it, so it was fine. It was like, whatever. And then they did all the visual upgrades and other stuff this year, and that was fine. NBA 2K, they did a lot more. They changed a lot more stuff in the new console versions, but the stuff that they had to lose to make that work wasn't the most important stuff by any stretch. They lost a couple of modes that were kind of cool, but not like all the core franchise mode, the be a player stuff, like all that stuff was in there, and it worked really well. So this is kind of jarring because they've had a full year since those consoles came out. And granted, this is the debut. They didn't even try to put stuff out on Xbox One or PS4 last year for NHL, but they had a whole year, and what they presented just is not good. It's not worth the money they're charging at all. Like, I could just as easily play NHL 14 for a whole nother year and be perfectly satisfied because that game's still really good and has all the stuff I like in it.
I think the best thing about this entire conversation is the user Fram in the chat, who is really getting into the puns. He makes the argument that maybe EA is on thin ice. Huh?
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that.
And he says, with this edition, all they did was stick to the basics.
I believe I also saw him say, you might say they dropped the puck.
They're just
Graham, you're an asshole, and I love you.
They're just skating on the core gameplay.
Oh, God damn it. All right, no more NHL in general. That game's a real bummer. Play last year's game. It's probably like $1 at this point. I have no idea.
I do encourage people, even if you aren't interested in NHL in particular, and I'm not, but I am. The way they present the missing content is really interesting, and you point that out in your review, in which essentially what they need to say is that all this stuff is coming, but the way they present it is not like, hey, we couldn't fit it in, and our production schedule was pretty tough, and we want to get it all in there, but so rather than not having it, we're going to get it all in the next couple of months. The way they kind of present it that way, but it's as though that's how it always goes. Like, this is just how it is. Look at us. We're going to provide you with all this content. Aren't you excited? As opposed to, this stuff was supposed to be in the box.
Yeah, it's really depressing. And again, recognizing the position that they are in, trying to sell that thing for the price that they have to sell it for. Totally understand why they decided to try and dance around that as much as possible, but don't believe that shit. That shit is lies. It's lies. Wait for next year. That team, I believe, can rebound because they have made so many good games over the years, and I think that they can probably fix it by next year. But don't fucking play this game. It's not worth it.
Now we're getting just bad puns.
No more. Don't encourage any more puns.
Fram, he nailed it. You don't leave it be. So that's NHL 15. Don't play it. Is what.
Vinny and I will record a quick look, I think, next week for that. So if you want to see it in action, we'll have it then. Otherwise, the review's up. Check it out there.
Yep. No. What do you got coming up next that you're going to play? Destiny's going to kind of be like the game I kind of play on the side.
Yeah.
I was thinking it might be the game that takes over my life. I don't think that's going to be the case. So, for me, it's probably going to be Destiny and hack and slash. But is there anything else that you're kind of looking to play?
Not really right now. I'm probably going to try and spend the next week getting through as much Destiny as I can where I can. I think I'm going to go back to start playing Madden again because I actually do like this year's Madden a fair bit more than I've liked the last few. So right now, the idea of playing video game football instead of maybe watching actual football, given some of the shit that's been going on with actual football, maybe sounds a little more. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to watch any actual football, but I tried to watch some of that Ravens-Steelers game last night, and at a certain point, I was just like, I can't.
Think of two more boring teams to watch.
Well, and on top of everything else, like, I just don't really want to watch the Ravens play right now. Like, it's not that I have any real ill will toward that team. I don't know. The fact that they had to cancel a Rihanna performance in front of a Ravens game as of the morning of the game is deeply emblematic of some of the things that are wrong with NFL and NFL broadcasting mentality right now.
Yeah. So, also, who wants to watch the Ravens play?
No one wants to watch the Ravens
No one
play,
wants to watch the Ravens play.
or the Raiders for that matter.
No. Well, and your Patriots aren't doing that well either. Well, week 1.
Well, they've only played one game, but yes, they didn't look great. They did not look great in that
Both
game.
of our teams are not off to a great start.
Nope. Maybe this will be a year where we can commiserate together about how our teams are falling off.
So yeah, okay. Let's see. Well, let's
talk about some news.
Some news. I don't know how I feel about. So Dying Light got moved up to January. So that game was going to come out at the end of March, and now it is coming out on January 27th. So, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that will be like the first big game of 2015. Batman, which we thought might come out in February, March, is now pushed all the way back to June. It'll be the what I guess is now becoming a tradition of the E3 game.
Yeah,
the big game that kind of comes around that time. But yeah, Dying Light got moved up, which is, to be able to say a game moved up a couple of months is something that is brand new to video games on this crop of consoles, to have a date actually move up. Although I guess, but Shadow of Mordor actually moved up as well from October to September. But I played Dying Light at E3, and while the parkour stuff certainly really does change how you play those games, I might have gotten my fill with Dead Island, and I'm not. And I liked Dead Island a lot. Brett and I were big fans of that game, but I don't know. I will probably play Dying Light because it'll be a game that's out, but I don't know how psyched I am to play it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I keep hearing mixed things from people who have seen it or played it. Like there are some people who seem to really, really like the parkour stuff and the way that kind of changes the dynamic of that sort of game. And there are some people who just say like, yeah, that's neat, but the actual game itself doesn't seem that interesting. So I don't really know what to make of it yet. I haven't had a chance to play it at all myself. I don't know. Like, as much as I basically enjoyed Dead Island, I don't know that I really need to play another one of those games, even if it is like somewhat different in the way that it is presented and the way the mechanics are. I don't know if I care enough. Yeah,
and they got rid of one of the things that I really liked about the Dead Island games. Brad and I are like one of the only ones that champion this. No, I'm not going to say dumb feature. It's a great feature. But then in the Dead Island games, you had the option to put on what they called analog combat. So when you would hit like the right stick or the right button to attack, normally the game would function in a way that it just sort of auto-determines where that attack comes from, like most games where it'll kind of vary up, left, down and stuff like that on its own. But if you turn on analog combat, you could actually move the arm around, and if you wanted to purposely cut off like the right arm, you could do that with a precision that was really satisfying. And
yeah,
they took that stuff all out. So,
and that's not cool. Let's talk about some birthday news for me.
Okay. Is it your birthday?
Guess what's coming out on my birthday?
What's going on your birthday?
Grand Theft Auto 5.
For the
PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. That was announced today.
PC is in January 27th, 2015.
Which I think is the same time that Gat Out of Hell is coming out.
Is it really?
I think so. Someone in the chat just said that. Let me... I don't know if that is 100% or not, but I think that's around the same time. I do believe that is a January game. So,
I only learned this recently that Volition is not making Gat Out of Hell.
Yeah, what is it? High Voltage?
Yeah, High Voltage joint, which I was already not super interested in Gat Out of Hell, but then also learning that High Voltage is making it.
Yeah.
From the developers of The Conduit, and The Conduit 2 comes a Saints Row expansion pack.
If the writing is done by the same Volition people, there is at least a marginal chance that it is still good or at least interesting. I don't know that I trust the High Voltage writers to tackle that stuff. And it is indeed January 27th, 2015. Same day as the PC version.
Although if you've not seen the ending to The Conduit 2, you've seen the ending to The Conduit 2, right?
Remind me.
It's at the end of the Conduit 2. There's a portal that opens, and what steps through is a bunch of time-traveling marine versions
Yes.
of the Founding Fathers.
Yes. I remember this.
Like
now I remember this.
Abe Lincoln in a military time travel suit walks out and says, "Do you want to help us save the world?" And I said, "I really want the Conduit 3."
And then it never happened.
No, because of course it didn't.
Because nobody bought the Conduit games. Nobody bought those games.
I don't know how we got to the Conduit 2.
Yeah. That is sort of a minor miracle that the Conduit 2 even exists. And miracle maybe is overstating it, but we'll say. Yeah.
Space Lincoln.
Space Lincoln.
I really want to play that game. I really do. Fuck. Oh, now I'm just bummed out.
Never gonna happen.
No, it's not. It's not. But I can. One can dream. One can dream. But yeah. So I don't have any interest in playing either of those games on PS4 or Xbox One, but I would be interested in screwing around with the PC version and seeing what the modding community ends up doing with it. I think that's where I'm interested. I know that Rockstar has promised in the past there is single-player expansion content coming at some point. What exactly that means, I'm not sure. I don't know if they're actually going to do what they did with 4 and put out proper 8 to 10 hour stories. I would love if they did that.
I would hope so.
I didn't dislike 5, but I was not super up on it either. I kind of enjoyed parts of it, but the story was not particularly great. And
if they can hone in on some of the parts of GTA 5 that were interesting, but were not the focus of the game, the way that the Michael, Trevor, and Franklin stories were, that could be cool, because I really like that world and I really like exploring it. And if they can find some other characters that aren't those fucking assholes that I can play as, I'm into that idea. I just don't want to play as those guys anymore. I don't care. I don't care about any of them. And it needs to go beyond just the core story stuff.
Oh, I've certainly expressed this in the past, but that the Rockstar is at its best with focused storytelling. When they don't have to tell a story over 45 hours, I find that they're able to create characters that don't have to trip over themselves to, be maintained over that period of time, and then become caricatures of themselves.
Right.
Like the GTA expansions for 4 were, I think, that tremendously enjoyable.
Totally. They're some of the best parts of that game.
As someone that's a big fan of the trashy show Sons of Anarchy, playing the closest thing to a video game version of that in GTA 4 was fucking awesome. I loved the Lost. I thought the Lost and Damned was better than the Ballad of Gay Tony, but I thought they were both pretty great. And the expansion they did for Red Dead Redemption, the zombie, I can't remember.
I think it was Zombie Nightmare or something like that.
Something like that. Either way, if you have not, watching Rockstar write a B movie was so much fun. I loved that. I liked Red Dead Redemption, generally speaking, kind of except for Mexico. But when they did that, that zombie expansion was fantastic.
Yeah, that was good. That was good stuff.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to the PC version, but I'll probably skip out on those next gen ones. They look pretty though. I playing that game at what one would assume is 60 frames a second, 1080p. It would be real pretty looking.
Yeah.
I didn't play Payday 2, but I am curious to play Payday 2 now that I have discovered they are doing a Hotline Miami DLC.
I'm into that.
The trailer that's out there for it is really disturbing. They put out, kind of a live-action trailer, which Payday has done for a lot of their stuff. But I guess, I don't know how exactly Hotline Miami translates to that. Maybe it's just masks and that's it.
I feel like it has to be. It just has to be costume stuff.
I would love it if they got really weird and surreal in the way that Hotline Miami has kind of a tendency to float into. Either way, the gimmick has gotten me interested in checking out a game that I otherwise would have just passed me by.
Yeah, and with valid reason. I mean, I played Payday 1 and I played a little bit of Payday 2, and neither of those games are overwhelmingly enjoyable. Knowing what little I have played of those games, I don't necessarily trust that they will actually take it in an interesting direction. This to me sounds like they will just find some ways to add some costuming and some weapons that sort of fit together with the Hotline Miami aesthetic. But let's see. Let's wait and see. It would be nice if they tried something unusual for that game.
That's true. For some reason, someone in the chat is linking me to HD screen caps of the X-Files.
Okay.
I didn't know that was... Well, it's a show that was not broadcast in high definition. So...
Ewan Doer says there is actually a whole heist planned around the Hotline Miami stuff. So that's cool.
Oh man, X-Files in HD looks pretty good.
I've lost you, haven't I? You're falling down this rabbit hole now, and there's no bringing you back.
Now I'm just looking at the screen captures of Fox Mulder in HD. My day is made. Let's see what else is going on. They put out a trailer for Resident Evil Revelations 2, the sequel to a game that already wasn't that great. But they're putting it out episodically, which I think is interesting. They're charging $6 per episode or $25 for all of them, and there are 4 episodes. You might be asking yourself, it seems like it's cheaper to buy each of those episodes separately rather than the bundle, and you would be right. But I guess there will be some additional content that makes it worth paying more money for all of them together. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Nope.
Like $24 versus $25. I don't get it. But I will probably play it because I'm a bad person. But I'm not that excited to play it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything else that?
That's all I got.
You want to bring up? Okay, this is what we're gonna do then. So we didn't get a chance to do it on Monday because Destiny, the servers went live, and because of the wonky review stuff, we ended up just kind of canceling the morning show because Brad and Jeff were playing that game all morning long. So we want to talk about The Walking Dead, the finale, and maybe about the season as a whole. And rather than tiptoeing around what's happening, we are going to go into full-on spoiler territory. And so we're going to mark the end of the show here for most of you. But if you would like to stick around and listen to our impressions of The Walking Dead Season 2, if you do not want any of The Walking Dead Season 2 to be spoiled, you should stop listening now. I will impress upon you again, we are going to spoil the Season 2 of The Walking Dead and all of the dramatic things that happen, especially in the finale. Characters are killed, some characters survive. So if you don't want to listen to that stuff, you should stop listening right now because I'm going to now ask Alex what he thought of the finale. And spoilers.
I did not really enjoy the majority of the finale of The Walking Dead Season 2. So if you've been following along with my recaps throughout the season, my reactions to the various episodes have fluctuated pretty wildly. I thought Episode 3 was actually pretty spectacular. Despite the fact that it does kind of ape a lot of storyline threads from the comics, like all the stuff with Carver kind of tends to, very least kind of mirror some of the stuff with like the Governor from the comics. But they did it really well, and they established a believable villain. They established realistic stakes that made sense. There was, a decent amount of character growth from some of the core characters in those situations. And then the last 2 episodes just kind of flopped for me. Once they got rid of Carver, once they kind of got out on the road and it became about delivering Rebecca's baby and then protecting that baby, and then everything else just kind of sort of, congealed around that. I feel like the game kind of lost track of itself, and it certainly lost characters. Most of the characters in Season 2 do not matter. They exist to bring the plot forward and no other reason. And in order for that to happen, they have to make some decisions that, frankly, just don't line up with how they're presented at various other times. They have to do things that just make no fucking sense at all. A key case in point for me in the finale was the situation where you lose Mike and Bonnie, who, throughout the whole thing, the last episode, there's this character Arvo, who is part of this group that ambushes you at the end of episode 4. They attack, and the end of that, at episode 5, Arvo is the only one who's alive. He's this shitty kid who is Russian and also just kind of shitty. And so you take him prisoner, and Kenny wants to beat the shit out of him constantly because he's responsible for terrible things that have befallen you. There's no reason anyone should be sympathetic to this kid other than the fact that Kenny is very mean to him and very violent toward him. And in order for the plot to get where it needs to go for its ending, they basically have to take two characters, Bonnie and Mike, who are not especially deep characters, but at the very least seem like the sort of people who would not eagerly betray someone like Clementine just to get away from Kenny. Especially not take up with someone like Arvo, who has no personality or any real, sympathy embedded in him other than the fact that he's getting beat up a lot. They actually make it so that Mike and Bonnie are willing to betray Clem, and basically they're betraying Kenny, but by
and they're leaving a child behind.
And leaving a child behind.
Like, not even Clementine. Like, they're leaving
the baby,
newborn. Like, it's such an unearned character turn that is clearly just there to put a wedge in the group, but which makes sense plot-wise, right? Like, to try and scatter the group. Like, that's a trope in these kinds of stories. You understand that those things are going to come up, but man, when it happens, you're just like, what a bunch of dicks. I hope they die.
Yeah.
Like, none of it. And also, I wanted to say what a bunch of dicks to the writers, because nothing about that is earned whatsoever. It is just suddenly, it is the most like M. Night Shyamalan of twists of it's a character turn to just be a character turn without laying any groundwork for something like that.
We have to get rid of these characters for our ending to work. So here's how we're going to do that as quickly and efficiently as possible, even if it makes no fucking sense. And it does make no fucking sense. But it's in keeping with the way a lot of characters have been treated throughout this season. Rebecca, who is, the woman who was pregnant throughout the season, you sort of form a bond with her at a certain point. But then, once it comes time for her to deliver the baby, they cannot get rid of her fast enough. It's like, okay, now the baby is alive, we don't need her anymore. Sarah, who is a character that, people have very divergent opinions about because of the fact that she has very clear, serious anxiety issues to the point where she is borderline catatonic at points in this season. You have the option to just leave her behind a couple of times, but the game also gives you the option to try and protect her and try and keep her with you and do what you have to do to keep her with you. Then they have to get rid of her at a certain point, so they just do it in the quickest, most, you saved her, but guess what? Now she's dead 20 minutes later kind of way. And it's horrible, and it just made me realize that most of the time you spend building relationships with characters throughout this season is a complete waste of time. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything. Because what they're trying to get you to at the very end of the season is a choice that has nothing to do with the relationships you've built. It has everything to do with you just deciding whether one person is worth saving or another based entirely on just their emotional states. Do you want to go with this cold, calculating person who is all about survival, is probably not going to get you into any danger, but at the same time maybe isn't that trustworthy? Or do you just want to choose this person who is an emotional wreck but only cares about protecting you and the child? And the way they deliver those, the way they get you to that choice is not very good, and the way they handle that choice is also not very good.
Yeah, when you play through season 1 of The Walking Dead, the structure of both seasons is that your choices don't mean a whole lot if we're talking about choice being true agency over the story, right? So, where Walking Dead Season 1 gets to, it gets there no matter what happens. But you feel along the way that you do have ownership over that story. It might be largely an illusion, but I felt like my story was my story. And they don't pull off that magic trick in Season 2. In Season 2, the writing feels so utterly transparent in terms of plot devices being plot devices or characters being there just to move the story along. And obviously you can break any story down to those elements. I'm not saying that's that's just true of writing, but it felt so, it didn't feel organic at all in Season 2. It just felt incredibly I don't know. I couldn't buy it. And it made it hard to invest in the story as a result. And I don't know if they would have been necessarily more successful with a new group of characters, but it felt especially disappointing when it was with Clementine.
Yeah, it's, the thing I said in my recap of the finale was Season 1, even if every episode wasn't 100% great, there were certainly story parts that didn't make a ton of sense. The stuff with the guy on the radio at the end, it didn't all fit together in a particularly neat way. But it didn't matter, because the core relationship between Lee and Clem was so good and so well built that even if other characters started to fly off, if they started to do dumb things, like this shit with Kenny at the end of Season 1, all that stuff, it didn't really matter, because that was ancillary to the core notion of Lee protecting Clementine, teaching Clementine, making Clementine into this, into someone who can survive on her own. And the way they conclude that is perfect. It is a perfect choice that feels like it is naturally built out of what took place throughout the season. This season never had that build. It never felt like it was building to that choice. Because for one thing, one of the people you're choosing at the very end of the game is someone you don't even really meet. You meet her in episode 3, and then you don't even get to know her until the second to last episode at all. So there's not really that connection there. There's maybe some of that connection with Kenny, because he is someone that you have that relationship with, but he's also so far gone and so crazed by this point that it's not like there's a real sympathetic tone to how those two play off each other. It's like Clem is walking on eggshells at all times around him. You're glad to see him when you first see him, but then you realize there's some serious fucking problems with this guy. So I don't necessarily expect the game to just create another, perfect loving relationship between two characters, but it has to make those relationships meaningful somehow for that stuff to work. Otherwise, the story has to be real fucking good and real fucking consistent, and it's neither of those things. It's a weird build to the Carver stuff, then it just kind of goes down another slope, and then it builds to something else out of not that much build-up. It doesn't really earn where it goes.
It does feel like there were two competing storylines. If you rank storylines in sort of the A storyline is sort of the general arc of a season, and then there are sub B, C, D storylines that are maybe character arcs or subplots that are occurring within that story. Both Carver being built as the main villain and Kenny being turned into an untrustworthy ally, those both felt like A plots. So they felt like they were crammed into the same season, when what really probably should have happened was a gradual build to Carver and a confrontation, and then a gradual in another season or an alternate version of the season where it's just the destruction of Kenny is the entire premise of the season, is 5 episodes dedicated to survival, in which you slowly see a man break, a man that wants to do good but loses his humanity and is unable to grasp that, which would be a nice sort of compliment to Lee, which was like someone who did wrong, committed a crime, and then in some ways tries to find redemption in the apocalypse through Clementine. Whereas you have, Kenny, who is a nice guy who obviously flawed, and then more flawed as he's faced with true horror, like having him essentially turn on you and break. That could have just been what they explored in season 2, but it felt like they needed to have, or they felt like they needed to have this main villain as well, who was fine. Carver worked
Carver was one of the best parts of the season. It's just they didn't give him enough time to really establish himself or, make an impact. Like the conversation that Clem has with Carver when they're in the Home Depot or whatever the fuck they call it, where he talks about how he sees something of himself in her. Like the interaction between those two characters is the closest this season has to a Lee Clem interaction. And how fucked up is that the villain of the season is the closest thing to a identifiable, believable human being than most of the other characters in this season.
Well, I think they could have set up an interesting dynamic there, right? Because what they try to do, and they've tried to reinforce this with like the My Clementine hashtag, like
which is bullshit. That was just marketing, whatever.
Right, but I think it's indicative of what they were trying to do in the storytelling, which was define who Clementine. Lee tried to craft this girl that was going to be able to survive in a broken world, and then she goes off on her own, and then has to define with the tools she was given from Lee, like who she is. And so the basis for season 2. And with the marketing, the marketing's dumb, but like it's in line thematically with what they're trying to set up of that who is Clementine. And I think you could have set up a season 2 in which the build is all about this complicated relationship between Clementine and Carver, in which Carver is portrayed as a monster, but a pragmatic one that does get things done. He's successful in the apocalypse. But at what cost to his own humanity? And they play with those ideas with Clementine, but I don't think particularly successfully. And so when you allude to one of the best conversations being between her and him, I think that's because that could have been something really interesting to mine. The idea of, is Clem, maybe not full-blown evil by the end, but the arc
but could she go that way?
Right. You could see them ending the Clementine arc entirely with, well, this is who she is, and then she's going to go on and have her story now that you've kind of built her into the woman that she's going to grow up to be. And that could have been an interesting way to end what Lee started, but they don't pull that off in season 2 at all.
Yeah. So let's talk briefly about the endings. There are several distinct ones that you can wander into, depending on the choice you make at the very end, which is basically deciding whether Kenny or Jane lives. The way they set this up, I really didn't care for. And granted, I appreciate the notion of a sort of morally ambiguous choice, because neither has a good situation. If you let Kenny kill Jane, that's fucked up. That guy has gone so far off the deep end that he is killing someone who at worst has been incredibly patronizing and needling to him, but has not physically harmed him in any way. But he believes that she has somehow killed the baby, and so he is just snapped. That is horrible. If you shoot Kenny, and you find out that Jane has in fact just put the baby away and did this all to kind of show you that Kenny was sort of irredeemable by this point, that's also incredibly fucked up. And in my mind, kind of unforgivable. I appreciate what they were going for here. The problem is that the endings that they build off of those choices don't fit together for me, because in my mind, the stuff that Jane does is kind of unconscionable. And so the first time I played through it, when I found out what she had done, I did not forgive her, and I went off on my own with AJ. And that results in the ending where Clem is just walking through a field by herself. She smears a bunch of walker guts on herself and then walks through a giant herd of walkers off into the horizon, which is actually kind of the ending I sort of predicted for the game before I knew there was multiple endings. But it's such a throwaway scene, like it doesn't really have any weight to it at all. Mm-hmm. It just didn't leave me feeling satisfied at all. So I went back and I tried the Jane thing again, where I forgive her. And then we go to the not Home Depot, and the family comes in, and all that stuff happens. And I was just like, none of this really works. Like, none of this makes any sense to me. Like, this character has done something really nasty. I understand why I might feasibly forgive her, because she is such a good survivor, and because she has instructed Clem in a lot of useful things. But the whole ending with the family, you can decide to keep them there or not. Like, it's just none of it felt like an actual satisfying conclusion to the story that had come from the rest of the season. So eventually I went back and I did the one where you let Kenny kill Jane, which is fucked for, any number of reasons. But if you forget him, the ending that comes from that, though it's a little neat in the way that it wraps up, like, it still feels like the closest to an actual meaningful conclusion to what has taken place throughout the season. He gets you to Wellington. That, to me, like, the moment where you have to decide whether you're going to go with Kenny or if you're going to go into Wellington, and that is, that is kind of like your final choice. I chose to go because that was what Kenny really wanted, and I didn't want to, force myself to take that away from him. That last moment where he's walking off into the horizon and you're walking in, like, that is a really nice scene. That was a really great scene. It also just didn't feel 100% correct for what had taken place prior to it. It felt like the ending from a situation where Kenny redeemed himself somehow prior. So, and that is why they are, happily strolling up to this place. It didn't feel like something that came from you just watching him stab someone through the heart who was your friend, and then being like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it just didn't completely work.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end, it just sort of felt like, wait, that's the ending? That's it? Yeah. That's where we're going to leave us? I only got one of the endings. I hold the controller and my wife makes the decisions. So, but she made the same decision I would have made, in which you shoot Kenny, you put the dog down, essentially, and then we forgave Jane. Although my wife and I went back and forth on that one, but yeah, it just sort of ends, and it doesn't feel. I don't know. I didn't feel like I had closure on. Yeah. It didn't feel like the arc ended. It felt like there was more. There should have been like another chunk of story that brought that over. If they wanted to end the season with you saying goodbye to Kenny, I guess I could have seen that as a way. I don't know, but the way it did end, it just sort of felt like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just none of the endings fit together for me. And Jack and Nuck in the chat says is surprised that I didn't see the symbolism in ending up back at Carver's place. Yes, I get the symbolism behind it. I still don't think it works. I don't think that ending really works, because what takes place before it, for you to get there, just never felt right to me. And maybe that's where the My Clementine stuff comes in. Maybe that's because I didn't feel like that kind of the decision where I would be okay going with Jane at the end of that made any sense for me based on what I had done throughout the season. That's maybe why I didn't like it. I'm not saying there's not symbolism there, but symbolism doesn't inherently make something good. Just because it is symbolic of something doesn't make it actually like a satisfying ending at all. And in my mind, yes, they've crafted something that is sort of symbolic, I guess, but it didn't work for me at all. So that is my issue with it.
So why don't we end this with, what do you? They're making a season 3. They've already said that they're gonna push forward with no big surprise. This is obviously a successful thing for them. So what do you want to see from season 3? Where would you want them to pick up with Clementine, or do you want to kind of wipe the slate clean?
I think they have to wipe the slate clean, because because of the way they've split the endings, I don't think there's any way you can build off that specifically. Like, I don't think you can't write a season around those 3 fairly disparate endings unless something really catastrophic happens, and no matter where you end up, suddenly everything has to change to begin season 3. Like, you could do that, but I also feel like that would kind of negate any point to season 2 whatsoever. So I think you have to start over with a new cast. I think you have to build something new, because I think Clementine's story is effectively ended at this point. I think it is where it is. I think the only ending that you could really build off of is the one where she's off on her own. And that one doesn't have enough behind it to really give you a direction or a thought as to where it might be going. So I think you have to start over.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't know where else you go with Clementine. It'd be cool if another season took place perhaps a little bit in the future, and if you know, just conveniently came across Clementine and you got a sense of, where did your actions take her? You're no longer in control of what she's doing, but what were the consequences of that? How is she doing? That seems like something reasonable they could do. But yeah, I think, I would have liked if they'd wiped the slate clean entirely with season 2, just because I thought it was going to be so easy for them to screw it up. And I feel like they did. And if they do bring Clementine back for another season, I'm not going to go as far as saying I won't play it, but I will be profoundly disappointed if that's where they go with this.
They'd have to set it pretty far in the future. They'd have to go pretty far ahead from the current timeline if they were going to do that, because I think at a certain point you can't have an entire season where you're protecting a baby unless that is the gameplay that you are trying to base the game around. That would be interesting, maybe. I don't know. But I think you have to grow her up some more, and I think you have to grow that kid up some more if you're going to do that. But I don't think they should. I think they should start with something different. I think it would make sense.
And also the way they set up the endings are so canonically different. I don't know how they could reasonably set up another season, because it's literally you are with Jane or you are with Kenny, and it isn't one of the options that you could leave Kenny behind and go into Wellington.
Yes, you can do that, or you can go off with Kenny. That's a split.
They sure seem to set up those endings as though that's the end of the story, because I don't know how you could satisfyingly pick one of those.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how those threads would work necessarily. So yeah, I'm. My guess is that I'm going to play season 3, and my guess is you're going to play season 3. But
I probably will. This one was a real bummer, but I'm willing to give season 3 a shot at least. But I have a little more trepidation about how they're going to handle this stuff going forward, because I don't want to give all the credit to the guys who wrote season 1 are now obviously off at campus, I know, doing their own thing, because I imagine a lot of different people worked on those games. And it wasn't just one thing. But that said, seeing how both The Wolf Among Us and Walking Dead Season 2 came together, I have some concerns about the creative direction for this stuff going forward. Like, it feels like maybe they're trying to do too many things at once. I don't know. But that comes off that way. And I would need to know, like, they'd have to have a pretty good premise for Walking Dead Season 3 for me to really get excited about it at this point.
That's fair, and that's where I'm at too, and that's where we're going to leave the show. So
yep.
That is the Walking Dead Season 2 in the books, and you're not going to play the Borderlands game, right? Probably, unless
I don't think so. I saw it in E3, and it seemed like it was okay. Like, the writing seemed all right, not in the it was definitely not as overtly wacky as as Borderlands 2 was, but it seemed like there was a story there. I just don't really care that much about that universe, so I probably won't dive in.
Yeah, I'll probably play the first episode. I'll play that with my, just because it's one of the few games or series that I play with my wife, so we'll probably play that, and then I'll let her give the thumbs up or thumbs down on whether we continue with that. But we will continue the show on Monday. But
yes.
We are going to end it for now. What do you got going on this weekend?
Not a whole lot. I'm going to play some more Destiny. I'm going to probably watch at least some football. And that's pretty much it. I think Vinny will be back at least some of next week. I don't know the whole week or not, but he will be back on a regular schedule pretty soon. So we will probably start recording some stuff early next week.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to it. I'm up at our Grandma's Lake House for the annual Klubnik Open, where a bunch of my dad's side of the family gets together. We have too much to drink, and we pretend to play golf. A couple of people are good at it. A lot of people are just there to drink beer and smoke cigars really early in the morning. So,
do you have like the lower tier family competition where it's like all the bad players are sort of competing against each other and the good ones are kind of off in their own?
We try and mix it up. We try and get the good with the bad. We allow the best to sort of lead, because you have tee times and we let them play first. So we try and stagger it a little bit, but Uh, I every year I say I need to go for one lesson because I'm not bad. I just don't know what I'm doing. Like half the time I'm pretty competent and I can hit par and stuff like that. But when I swing, I don't when I do it wrong, I'm not sure what I did wrong, and when I do it well, I'm not super sure what I did. Which yeah, so I should
Yeah.
spend a day and do that. But I didn't. Too late now. So now I've got to play 36 holes, not knowing what I'm doing. So that's been my weekend. But I'll drink my sorrows away, and it'll all be okay.
Sounds like fun.
All right. Well, Alex, I will see you on Monday.
Oh.